Hey guys, this is Gene Jensen.
What's going on, guys? Ryan Lamb.
And we're in the truck again. This is something we did a long time ago, and we're bringing it back. And the subject for today is whatever we want to talk about. Spawn, pre-spawn. Enjoy. All right, so what this in the truck again thing is Ryan and I, when we travel, we talk about fishing. And we get into dirty details and everything else. Well, we want to include you guys in it, and this is something that we did prior, and it was really good with lousy audio. So now we've got a really good GoPro, and we just want to teach you guys everything that we know about whatever subject we decide to talk about in the video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this. This is going to be a lot of fun. So,
dirty details. I mean, dude, we get down to the nitty freaking gritty, dude.
Yep. So pre-spawn. What do we like about the pre-spawn? That's my favorite time of the year to fish. The water temperature now. What I consider pre-spawn is your water temperatures, no matter where you're at in the country, are going to get to its lowest point in the wintertime, of course. And as soon as those temperatures start to climb, I consider that pre-spawn. I don't care if it's 32 degree water temperature. As soon as those temperatures start to climb, the fish start to feed, and they start to get a little bit happier and a little bit happier. So pre-spawn is that period of time between the time the temperatures start going up.
Really happy.
Oh yeah, even in cold water they get happy. But from the time they climb until they start spawning in early 60 degree, low 60 degree water, that's pre-spawn, and that's kind of what we're talking about. All right, guys, before we go any further, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We're going to be busting out tons of knowledge like what we're doing right here. So if you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button.
And it's going to get a lot deeper.
All right, so what lures do I have on my boat during pre-spawn? It's pretty simple for me. The crawfish are fairly active when it's cold. The bass like to look for a real easy meal, and a good chunky crawfish is a good easy meal in that period of time. So I'm going to have crawfish imitating baits, whether it be a lipless crankbait, a square bill, a jig. I love red colors, so I'm going to use a jig with a little bit of red or a little bit of orange in it. Just, that's going to be my primary. I'm going to have something I can flip to cover, and I'm going to have something I can cover water with. Another one is a chatterbait. Is one of my favorites, especially when there's a lot of grass.
Yeah, if you got grass in your lakes, that's going to bring the bass up shallow. It's going to bring them to the shallow water quicker.
Yep.
Once that green grass starts growing, and a chatterbait, chatterbait and a paddle tail. I don't really know if you can beat that in the pre-spawn.
No.
In grass.
Yep.
And lipless crankbait being ripped out of the grass on the deeper edges.
Yep. Yep. So what are some of the techniques that you like to use, Ryan, and how do you use them?
So pre-spawn is it's pretty easy, man. It's and I think in one of our videos we did the top 5 lures for late winter.
And that's basically
pre-spawn. So when I opened up that video, I was like, late winter is kind of weird, and it is, because they're in an odd transitional phase. Once they're in pre-spawn, it's real predictable, dude. I mean, there's a couple baits that I use, and when I hit a new lake or even a lake that I know and just start searching for fish that have moved up and are staging, main weapon in earlier pre-spawn is definitely a crankbait. Whether it be really two that stand out to me are the Rapala DT10 and the Strike King 3XD.
And I don't know why a crankbait works so well when the water's so cold.
And the thing is that when the pre-spawn starts, that you always hear about that 8-foot depth, that like that magical depth. There's so many fish at 8 feet deep, and so what I really like to do is just point hop, whether it's I try to figure out where they've progressed, where they've moved to, because a lot of times during pre-spawn, the fish move in waves. There'll be some that are still in their winter holes. There's going to be fish that are right on the the main points that are entering into a big creek arm, then you're gonna have waves of fish that have, you know, pushed up almost all the way to the back. You know, it just depends on that wave of fish. And so taking a crankbait and just, I call it point hopping. The way I cover a point is I like to start, you know, the typical way. I'll start on the deep end, throw up shallow, bring it down the center, bring it down the sides, and then I start chopping it up, man. Almost like you make like a
grid.
Yeah, like a grid, you know. So start throwing across it, you know, start from the shallow side, work your way out deep, throwing across it, and then when you're out on the deep side, start throwing diagonal and just work your way around the point and hit it every direction. I mean, you're gonna make, you know, 30 to 50 casts on each point.
Yep.
But the thing is that once you figure out, you know, you can be on a point and you can even not even, you know, if you're graphing points and you don't see much, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a wad of fish in there that you just didn't pick up on the graph. So that crankbait is such a great tool because it's a time of year where fish get triggered by certain retrieves. It's really kind of a funky thing. You know, we're leaving Lake Jordan, and we literally figured out that the only way to get bit on a jig was to just a very sharp but short hop. You know, snapping the slack line and right at the, almost kind of like working a jerkbait in a way, but just snapping it up, and that was the only way that we could get bit. And so by taking a crankbait and running those points, you figure out which direction the fish want it. And I've even seen it where it's not even a pattern that you can use. It kind of changes for each group of fish.
Yep.
You know, I mean, you'll have one group of fish where they want it coming from the deep water to the shallow water, coming from the right side of the point to the left. And then you get to the next point and the fish are stacked up in the end, and you catch them on, you know, throwing from the shallow, you know, starting on the shallow side, throwing out deep and working it. So the crankbait is for the beginning of pre-spawn and searching, that is my #1 tool, because you can fish anywhere from a foot to 10 feet deep, and that DT10 is just a killer, and the Strike King 3XD is just a killer.
Yeah, that's why I tend to use a lipless crankbait.
Yeah,
because it sinks. I can adjust the depth just by allowing it to fall further and reeling it slower and bumping into things. And then once I get that magic depth, if they're not, and you know, usually they're inhaling the lipless crankbait, but if they're not, if they're just short striking, I'll switch to a deeper diving crankbait. And
that's one of the advantages when we go out and search, is that, you know, Gene's throwing that lipless crankbait, I'm throwing the actual crankbait, and it not only is it searching for the fish, but I mean, dude, you find little sweet spots where, I mean, how many times have we been out where, you know, we're fishing a point, or we get into a pocket or whatever, we bump into something and we're like, hold on, wait,
yeah.
You know, there's a stump down there.
My lipless crankbait video that I made several years ago, I caught every single one of those fish on a rock that was about half the size of the boat, the deck of my boat. And I caught one, and I would leave for a half hour, come back, catch another one, leave for a half hour. Those were 6, 7, 8 pound bass, all coming up and holding on the same exact rock. And as long as I hit that rock from any direction, I was going to get bit.
And why were they on that rock, Gene? I think that's very important to know.
Exactly. The rock was about 7 feet deep, 6, 7 feet deep, and those rocks that time of year with the sun shining on them, they heat up. And those bass have their bellies up against that rock. They move up to warm up.
It can be a half a degree.
Yeah. It doesn't, yeah.
And here's the other thing. Even on cloudy days, those UV rays are coming through those clouds, and they're heating up those rocks. So rock is critical, especially flat rocks. That's one of the things that Mike Licanelli was talking about, is so key in pre-spawn, is that he was talking about the flatter the rock, and it makes sense. The more exposure it's going to get to those UV rays, and he calls them solar panels.
Yep.
And that's all he targets in pre-spawn.
Yep. And then I've been places where it wasn't the flat rocks, because there weren't any, but it was dark bottom in shallow water, because that dark bottom absorbs that heat and it warms up faster than anything else. I remember years ago, me and a buddy of mine, we caught probably 40 fish off of the same dark spots in one pocket, because that's what was warming up faster. So I mean, it's just
another thing too is if you know, every lake, you know, obviously is what, you know, there's huge differences. If you have those floating docks that are black, they will absorb heat, and I have seen situations in pre-spawn where those docks are loaded with fish.
Yeah, and a way to catch those is throw on a little shallow running square bill, tweak the little eyelet just a little bit to get it to run to the side. What I'll do is I'll get 2 rods, because I have 2 rods. I'll have one that'll swim this way and one that'll swim crooked the other way, and I'll bump them in. I'll get them up underneath those docks, underneath those floats.
Yeah, they'll swim under. They'll swim under
because they're swimming crooked. And one of those little tips that I do to get the fish that are belly, up underneath those docks where they're warming up better.
And they put themselves against the object. I mean, they're physically against it, and so that's why getting that bait. It's not so much the bait bumping off stuff and having an erratic, a crazy look to it. It's more about the fact that you're putting it right in front of the fish's face, and even if they don't want to eat, crankbait smashing in their face and get them to bite.
All right, so another one is a jig or a creature bait. One of the things that actually I learned from Ryan years ago when we were guiding out at Kingfisher was you flip in next to a brush pile and you let that creature bait sit there the dead stick it. Sit there for 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 seconds, and then just shake it on a slack line just enough to get whatever is hanging off of that bait just to do this. And what has happened is the water's so cold and the fish are so lethargic that you throw in there and it goes past them, and it takes them a while to get down there and get nose down. They're sitting there staring at it.
Yeah.
They're eyeballing it, and they're doing this number, and all of a sudden it goes whoop, and they're like, and it's gone,
Dude, there was, on that trip, there were times that I wasn't moving the bait for a minute.
Yep.
I mean, I would let it sit there for a minute or two, and all I would do is, you have that semi-slack line, so you still will feel if a fish picks it up. And all I had to do was, there were literally times where it had to be 60 seconds plus, and I just go one shake, just one little shake, and just like Gene's saying, the bait opens up just a little bit, and dude,
that's when a skirted jig with a living rubber on it. Golly, because that living rubber will undulate even in the lightest amount of current, and if it's a little bit you shake it, it just goes.
Even on windy days, you can if they're in that mode, you can use the wind to your advantage, where you don't even have to move the bait. Just the wind alone is touching your line a little bit.
Yep.
And that bait is moving underwater. If y'all have pools at home or anything, buy a little kiddie pool. That's
do it in a bathtub.
Yeah, me and Gene have filled up whatever we've had to with water, pitchers, whatever, just to see what the bait will look like underwater.
Yeah. With the slightest amount of motion.
Yeah, those things move, and try different things. There's times where when we were just at Jordan here, I had a big old Gary Yamamoto, big old creature bait on that jig, and they waxed it. Every single fish that I caught, it wasn't like I was taking 5-10 seconds to set the hook. They would thump it, I would set the hook, and that bait, all you could see when I brought them in was line. They had sucked the jig so far down. So that's the jig, when you find them, and that's what earlier we were talking about, bumping a stump and being like, hold on, wait a second, and we'll sit there and soak that spot. There's times where we've had to make 10-15 casts to an object, and then finally a fish bites, but they're usually big fish.
And another thing we can't leave out is a jerk bait.
Yes.
A jerk bait, especially when the water temperature's below 50 degrees, in the 40s, in the 30s, a jerk bait can be something that just gets you bite after bite after bite. Now, say for instance you've got the fish in 20 feet of water. It amazes me how far up off the bottom a bass will come to hit a jerk bait. You may have to work it really, really slow, but if you've got bass hanging on a break line on a side of a point where a creek channel runs up against it, or on the end of a bluff wall, when I say end of the bluff wall, you got the bluff wall and then you've got an end, where it stops and it starts to level back out. Those are magnets that time of year for the fish, and you can sit there and just jerk, just use a jerk bait, let it pause, and those fish will come up real slow, and they'll come out of deep, deep water to hit that. That's why.
They kind of stalk it.
Yeah, and that's why you don't have a lot of jerk baits. You have a jerk bait that'll run 5 to 7 feet deep, and then you have other jerk baits that run 10 to 12 feet deep. And so you really have to understand that fish, even though they are lethargic, you don't have to get all the way down to them. If they can see the bait in clear waters, a jerk bait, you know, is jerk bait heaven, they'll come up and they'll hit it.
And make sure you're burying the jerkbait retriever. That's huge. I mean, there's times where, you know, even in really cold water, I've caught, you know, largemouth are the most sensitive fish. I mean, they're so temperamental. But there's not, you know, there's times even with largemouth in cold water where real aggressive retrieval work. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, if the fish are real lethargic, and I mean, you can tell pretty quick when you get on the lake, you know, if they're kind of swiping at a crankbait or if they're kind of swiping at the jerkbait or whatever, you're getting little short strikes. They're not active. You know, so one of the things you can do with a jerkbait is when you let it sit and you know there's fish in an area and you're confident that there's a fish looking at it, try and work the jerkbait like a shaky head. That's a retrieve that a lot of people don't use, and it freaking kills them. When there's a fish looking at a jerkbait and it's sitting there and it's kind of nose down, and you shake it and that jerkbait just quivers a little bit. It's just a little bit of a wobble.
Yep.
And I mean, you know, you can get a fish that are real lethargic will not be able to stand that, and that's one of the that's definitely one of the big things that, you know, on a jerk retrieve. The other thing that I want to talk about is my fluke.
Well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
One of the key things about a jerkbait is the rod. Okay.
Yes.
A fluorocarbon line, of course, but if you're using too stiff of a rod, you're going to lose a lot of fish. You really need a really, really whippy, medium, moderate action rod. I keep looking down at my GPS, guys, and we're in the back roads of Alabama, so I'm making sure I'm not hitting any really sharp turns. But anyway, so you have to make sure you've got a whippy rod to absorb that fish fighting and not allow him to gain leverage on you and shake the bait.
And a lot of times they're hooked on the back hook because they short strike it.
Yep.
So you have to be able to really finesse the fish in. You know, you don't want to crank them in fast. Just like Gene's saying, that rod needs to have a lot of bend, a lot of give. And, you know, because, I mean, how many fish have we caught on jerkbaits where they're hooked, you know, with the back hook with one of them, you know, it's barely skin hooked, you know, or they're foul hooked. They just come up and take a quick swipe at it and they end up hooking themselves.
Yeah. And then other times of the year, you can afford to go up to a stiffer rod because you're working it faster. You know, and I know there's a lot of pros that use a medium or a medium heavy moderate action rod to really, you know, or a medium heavy moderate action rod to really whip it and get, you know, be able to work it really, really fast. That's great when they're really active, but in that cold water, man, I'm telling you, medium moderate, a whippy medium moderate action rod is almost a must.
So me and Gene real quick want to share one of our little secrets. This is something that I kind of stumbled upon about 10 years ago, and it's been something that I crushed the fish with it the first time it happened, and I shared it with Gene. And this is a pre-spawn thing that we do when the bite's really slow, the bait's a little bit deeper, and the fish will not commit to hitting a jerk bait, but they are suspended.
Yeah, and it's very, very specific on all the equipment, from the hook, the line, and everything you use. It is very, very, very specific as to whether it's going to work or not.
So here's the setup, okay? You have a 7-foot spinning rig. You've got to use a spinning setup, okay? And I use a 7-foot medium power, moderate action, okay? And I like a 3,000 size reel, 13 fishing, you know, makes a. I use a 3,000 size reel. That's just my personal preference. I feel like I can get a little more distance out of it. You have to use 8-pound fluorocarbon. Do not use braid. You got to spool up with 8-pound fluorocarbon because it sinks, and that's part of this process.
And you got a lot of line that needs to sink in order for this to happen.
We use Spro spindles because they're a little bit smaller and they're real flashy. We use the 130-pound test one, which sounds like a giant swivel, but it's like that big. It's probably, what, 1/4 of an inch?
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, it's tiny. So then, an 8 to 10 inch leader. It cannot be a long leader like a Carolina ring. It's got to be short. A 4-aught EWG hook. Doesn't matter the brand. I use Armuchee just because I like their light wire stuff. And we use a Zoom Super Fluke. The reason we use the Super Fluke is because we like the sink rate on it. So, gee, you rig that up, Texas rig, and don't text pose it, don't anything. Leave the, just Texas rig it, but don't have the point buried in the plastic. Leave it open. How do you work it?
Basically, and I kind of get a little bit more elaborate with how I work mine, is you throw it way out. Make sure you make a good long cast over a bluff or over a drop that's underwater, or on a point in early pre-spawn, and you just let it sink on a slack line. Okay, watching that line real close for anything to jump and anything like that. I call it eating a sandwich because it takes a while for it to drop. Okay, and then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna jerk it once and wait 2 or 3 seconds, and jerk it twice more and wait. Yeah, real soft jerks. You're literally just tapping the line from a slack line to a straight line, so it's top. And that bait, all it's gonna do is just gonna go boop, and then it's gonna fall, and it's gonna go boop, boop, and then it's gonna fall, and you wait 2 or 3 seconds. And what it looks like is a larger fish is chasing a real tiny fish, which is the barrel swivel.
And that's why we like the Spros. They're real shiny.
Yeah, real shiny.
Yeah.
And that's why you use the short 8-inch leaders, is to make it look like that. And that triggers a feeding reaction in the bass that can see that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, people talk about reaction strike. It's instinct. They see feeding going on, they get fired up.
Yep.
And it's an excellent way to catch them when they're sitting 10 to 20 feet deep, suspended, and they won't touch anything. I mean, dude, and like I said, I just stumbled on it, and that exact setup, we have found that when we stray away from that, we get less bites.
Yep.
And you gotta let it get down there, and that bait will go. I mean, we fished it in 25, 30 feet of water before. We can get it to sink down that deep. It takes a while, but guys, try that technique. It's something that a lot of people don't do. It gives the fish a presentation that really they never see. When they're sitting that deep, they don't see a soft plastic jerkbait coming. If they do, it's on a fish head spin, or it's on something where it's got a different motion. But that kind of dying action, whether they're looking at that or they're looking at the fluke chasing the barrel swivel, and it looks almost like it triggers that competitive thing. They whack it. So that's kind of that's one of those little things. I mean, there's no golden ticket in bass fishing, but that's been one of our little kind of, not a secret technique, just something that we do when the water is somewhere between 45 and maybe 57, somewhere 58, somewhere in that area. Dude, it rocks them. So give it a try. We don't mind, telling about these techniques. It's something that we've never made a video on. But definitely give that a try because it freaking works.
All right, so now we're going to talk about location. How do you locate bass in the pre-spawn? Basically, bass at that period of time, at that time of the year, are migrating. That as soon as that water temperature starts to warm up, they're like, "Whoa!" They start looking for that spawning flat, and they start to migrate from their deep water winter haunts to the spawning flat. So I pick an area of a lake, usually a large creek arm, and I go find the deepest water in the mouth of that creek arm, and I start fishing the points that are the steepest or the closest to that deep water. It's where I'm going to start early. Now, a week or so into it, I'm going to flip-flop. I do things a little bit different than a lot of people. I go to the backs of the creek and I work my way out, only because I've had certain situations where the fish should have been in the mouths of the creek, but the big ones had already made their way all the way to the last bend in the creek channel before the spawning flat, and that's where all the big ones were. And so
the advantage to doing that is that you can get caught up catching 2 to 3 pounders in the mouth of the creek and be like, oh, I'm onto something. And you have no idea that if you had just gone, just like what Gene's saying, to the end of the creek. I mean, I've seen this dude go back there and I'm like, why are we moving? Before he, told me about this and we caught onto this. And, I was hung up on the fish we were catching, and we go back there.
Yeah, I'm like, we got to go to the back.
And if we were fishing a tournament, we would have missed out on a 6 or 7 pound kicker fish. I mean, that's huge. That's a big deal.
Yep. So I may start, especially when it's a jerkbait bite, out in that deeper water with those deeper breaks and things like that. But I tell you, as soon as I feel that, you know, that definite, it's going to stay warm weather, where the nights are warmer than the water temperature, you know, multiple nights in a row are warmer than water temperature, I head to the backs of the creeks and start throwing crankbaits and beating the crap out of every little point and secondary point and every log and tree and stump and everything back in the back until I figure out what they're holding on. That's where I catch the big ones. It's how I catch the biggest fish of the year. And if you do that, I promise you that you're gonna find a wad of just tanks.
Follow the channel.
Yep, follow the channel. That channel's their highway.
Another thing too is when you get into the back of pockets, when you're running along, if you see little tiny pockets, line up right in the center of that thing and throw a crankbait right down the middle of it.
Yep.
And what happens is those little ditches that come out of the, you know, when lakes drop, you know, the water runoff makes those little tiny ditches. And if your lake doesn't have a lot of silt in it, those ditches are going to stay. And so by taking a crankbait, and again, I throw, it's not you know, I have no affiliation with these companies. It's just what I like to throw. I like to throw a crankbait that hits 10 feet, and that's the DT10. I mean, it consistently hits it. And so throw down the center and kind of fan cast around, because a lot of times they'll just, for whatever reason, there'll be one or two big females just sitting there.
Yeah, waiting for the spawn, and the males will come up and make their bed, and the females will just come out of that deep water, or that ditch, and right up into it. Another one is, as you're going back into the backs of these creeks, pay attention to the angle of the banks.
Yes.
Okay, so what's going in the water? There's always a steep side, there's always a shallow side, especially when it's a creek arm, and I'm going to focus, I'm going to go and I'm going to say, okay, there's a steep bank. I'm going to go to that steep bank, and I'm going to fish the ends of it. In other words, where it stops being steep and starts to gradually taper back out, because what that is that's a point in the creek arm that's swinging up against the bank. And they love to stack on those little points. You can make, 9 times out of 10, you can't see them on you can't see them on a map. It's just where the creek arm runs up against it, and they're sitting right there. And you make multiple casts there, you'll find them at the beginning and at the end of where that creek arm swings. And you've heard of a channel swing. Creek arm, it's where the creek arm swings up against the bank. I'll make a few casts right where it's buttoned up against the bank, but I find that if there's not a shelf there along that creek, that swing, they're going to be off to either side of it. So,
and I mean, and what you're saying, I mean, think about it. You got, you know, you always hear people say, you know, bass need access to deep water and you know, quick escape routes, and that's where the big ones live. Well, that's what you're getting there, and that's true. A lot, you know, big bass need deep water nearby, and even, you know, this week of fishing, every fish we caught was we caught some big females, but even though we were catching them shallow, you could have made a 20-foot cast behind the boat and been in 30 feet of water. So having deep water, and that's all relative to the lake you're fishing. You know, I mean, there's, you know, 6 feet could be deep. You know, it just depends on what you're fishing. But that creek arm swinging up against that area that Gene's talking about gives those bass security. They can get back down in there, and that's, I'm talking about security. Like if, you know, if a cold front blows through, you know, they can pull back out and they don't have to move much. You know, it's all about efficiency and how many calories they're burning. Their metabolism's slow, so they don't want to move a whole lot. So they can have that creek arm to sit in, deeper water, and they can just move up a couple, you know, it's a short distance and feed, and then pull back out. Yep. And that's a really important thing for locating big females in the pre-spawn. Yep.
All right, guys, so that is the nitty-gritty about pre-spawn bass fishing. After that, it's the spawn. We'll talk about that on the next, what are we calling this again?
On the road again.
On the road again.
Yeah. So we will be on the road again a lot.
Very soon, very soon.
We're on the road too much.
All right, well, like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go ahead and catch some fish, and have a great day.